Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shadow TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shadow TV Westworld Edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO show Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons. Alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the wonderful Carrie Gross.
Hello.
This is our fan email episode where we look back at this week's episode of Westworld and provide our feedback on the top listener emails and voicemails for the week. This week's episode is titled Journey into Night. So you spent an hour listening to our ideas on Tuesday's Deep Dive. Now it's our turn to hear from you. Big D, we got some voicemails this time. This is new territory for us.
We do. First we got Carrie Gross on the podcast, and for our Westworld listeners from last year, she joined us in our Shat the Movies probably a couple months ago when Roger had to go out of town for business. So we're just breaking new ground left and right here on our Westworld cast.
Yeah, I just actually started watching it 1 week ago, kind of late to the game. So I'm all caught up and delving deep into fan theories. So I'm really excited.
Okay, but hold on. I want to let people know. Yes, she started a week ago, but she has steamrolled through the entire show, watched episodes multiple times, and she has what looks like the writings of a madwoman scribbled into a notebook of timelines and just sketches. She is perfect for this. She's put in her time, so we're excited to have you with us.
So one of our longtime listeners, Gillian, emailed us and sent us an invitation to her timeline that she's been creating, and I was like, oh my God, like she's gone into the rabbit hole with the timeline. And then Carrie shows up with one drawn on paper. I was like, all right, next level.
Again, if we didn't read your email on the show or listen to the voicemail, we apologize. We're trying to keep it around that 1 hour mark, but we get so much good stuff. I always feel bad. The amount of work people put in and we don't read it, we do appreciate it. And please keep them coming.
As an editor, I just like to slash all of them. So we're going to do this one in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, Big D, fire up that telegraph.
Okay, so our first email comes from Michael Casanova. It says, hi, massive fan of the podcast here from the UK. As I rewatch the series already for series 2, I have been subtly picking up on bits to figure out if I can work out the location of Westworld, amongst other things. I've noticed a couple things and wondered whether I'm reading into it too much. The service tunnels in the scenes under Westworld, there appears to be a Hyperloop type transport system. You can see the trains flash by. These trains run in sealed tunnels like the Hyperloop system. This is different from the maglev style trains you see departing from Westworld Station. Would this suggest they are in a remote location on Earth, maybe mainland China? Maybe the sealed tunnels are used to go underwater for the mainland. Dr. Ford's speech with Teresa suggests that in here we are gods. In here is a strange way to describe a location such as a theme park, in my opinion. I wouldn't describe my hometown in such a way, nor a park. It would suggest a location may be sealed off from the outside. While I don't prescribe the theories about Westworld being located on the moon or underwater, it does suggest something similar sealed off from the otherwise. In a speech so carefully crafted, it would surprise me if it was a slip or a misuse of the words. Given that there are 6 parks and clearly tight controls of anything from the outside getting in, I can't figure it out. It's such a fascinating topic. According to Nolan, we have been told where the park is located. This is probably one of the greatest mysteries for me. I can't wait to discover the location of the parks. I wonder what your thoughts are on the location and what for you guys is the biggest missing piece you'd love to be solved. Thanks for reading. Can't wait for season 2 to start so I can enjoy more amazing podcast goodness from yourselves. Michael.
In the last episode, we got our most definite answer was the soldiers that are on the beach and having a conversation with Strand, where he's ushering them, saying, have them sign an NDA and get them off the beach. The soldier is speaking Cantonese, and he's wearing an officer's uniform for the Chinese People's Liberation Army as a senior officer. I don't know if he says the word, get them off my island or off my beach. Do you remember what word he used?
He specifically said island in the subtitles. It said, get him off my island. But again, the thing with this is I think it could be a misdirect in the sense that we are propelled into the future. If you believe some projections, China will emerge as a dominant superpower, an economic power. And it could very well be that if you look at the geography of the island, and the way that they're able to terraform it, it doesn't seem like it's anything that we know of. The idea that they say that we have already been told where it is. I mean, Delos is an island. It's a mythical Greek island, and we talked about that before in season 1 of the podcast. So it's a distinct possibility that they've already told us where it is. It's off the coast of Greece, although it doesn't look like it.
No, and I think the Hyperloop, I think we're reading a bit too much into it. You want to be able to control, much like a zoo, the assets within the park. You don't want we see already that there's a desire for other companies to acquire the IP. The more ways you have for people to get onto the island or off would make it more difficult to secure. So I'm still thinking it's that traditional train we've seen coming in and out of port, but there has to be some large central port, I'm imagining, where Seacraft can come in.
And I know that Ford said everything here is code. And so some people have said, oh, maybe it is a simulation or whatever. I do feel that they've made a great effort on the show to make us understand that this is a physical space. It is a large physical space. And I want to believe that's the case. Now, whether it's a Hunger Games type dome or whatever, I don't know. The weather seems to be pretty consistent all the time. But that wouldn't really explain the boats then. Why were they using boats to come in?
No, and also, if you're doing it in some kind of a dome, there's no reason to travel halfway across the world. You could build one of those almost anywhere if it's a simulation.
I think you could see in either the last episode of last season or the first episode that they show like the headquarters up on that mountain. And I think that's like where the guests arrive, but probably from, other islands to the island of Delos. Well,
that's the mesa. And they'll actually, once they're in the park, there's a limit of how long you can stay. Because after, a lot of times like you'll lose yourself in the game. So they make, I think it was like 20 something days. So that's almost where they have to decompress before they leave the park again. So that you can't just take these people who've been living in the Wild West, shooting and raping and killing everything, and just throw them back on the street. It might make home life a little bizarre.
No, that'd be like prison or something.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. Yeah, but I was going to say in prison you're not killing people, but you probably are.
Thanks, Michael. Next up is an email from Adam Proctor. It says, hey guys, I had a theory I wanted to share, and I think it explains why both Delos needs to extract a host from the park and why Ford has so much power. We know that nobody knows how to make a passable AI other than Ford and Bernard. It doesn't seem like it's solved a problem because even Ford doesn't seem to understand how Arnold laid the foundation or Bernard filled in the gaps. People seem to be able to iterate on top of the base behaviors of the hosts, but I believe the reason they're so valuable is that they have a core knowledge base that is not easy to parse. It reminds me how machine learning-based algorithms can end up using a trained database of logic that is incomprehensible to original authors. Things like YouTube algorithms are black boxes, and the engineers aren't quite sure why the algorithm flagged a video as offensive. It's just been trained that way. I believe that nobody can create a believable AI without smuggling out a core set of data that the hosts use. And the data is not contained within a single host, but distributed amongst them as a network. In my opinion, this unparsable data is the IP that Delos wants. The most obvious use of this would be Manchurian candidate people in the real world. Ford maybe cares so much about this that he built a contingency plan if it looked like Delos was going to ever get what they wanted, which in my opinion would require destroying all the hosts. I think the entire chaos is scripted by Ford. The machine's consciousness isn't linked to the revolt. He has scripted Bernard, Dolores, Maeve, and others to not only cause chaos, but to clean house, with the hope that nobody ever will be able to replicate what they unlocked. Cheers, Adam from Toronto.
So I'm a big advocate of this one. I like what Adam's doing here. The only issue I have with it is that I don't think that Ford had such a malevolent intent. He seemed to really feel like he wanted to atone for what he had done with the hosts, and that he really had faith that there was something better for them, some sort of evolution, and not just as simple as cleaning out a floppy drive. I think if he wanted to do that, if he wanted to secure the assets and wipe anything from Delos' hands, I think there are easier ways to do it.
There's also the chance that he wants to protect the host, his creation, from something far worse than the park. Yeah, the park, they're suffering, but at least they're wiped at the end of their cycle. There could be some kind of a military application to the AI and to the IP that would be far more devastating. If you created an autonomous force out of these hosts, they could cause some real damage. So he could not only be protecting the hosts, he could also be trying to protect the humans and the rest of the world.
I agree with you when you say that, Ford protected them by clearing their memory every night and insisting that they go into a deep sleep. And, he wants to take away their pain. That I feel like he has this feeling that if Delos takes over, they don't have time for that. They don't care about clearing their memories or relieving them of pain.
Yeah, and there's also the chance that Ford still has no idea what it was that triggered them to become aware, that it could have just been over time. Like it was Adam discussed machine learning. From the point where Arnold dies, the machines have gone through so many iterations and so many loops of learning, and it's the relationship between hosts, how they interact, learning from situation, hive knowledge that's being shared between all the hosts. He might not have the answer. He might just be playing along like he knows what's going on. But if you take the IP out of the park and then Delos has to kind of reverse engineer it, that could be hell for the hosts.
Thanks, Adam from Toronto. One of our loyal listeners, Jez from London, wrote a long, thorough email with several theories in it, and we'll post it online so you can read the whole thing. But one part's really stuck out to us that we wanted to touch on about the young Robert host. So she writes, young Robert host, creepy little Robert has the same knack of appearing in the park out of thin air and Dr. Ford does. He speaks with his own voice, which keeps morphing into Ford's voice. This supports a theory of mine about Angela. Last season, it felt like there were times that Angela was actually just Ford speaking, like an avatar. The scene in particular I'm thinking of is in episode 9, where Teddy is talking about his memories of Wyatt, and she tells him to remember again, and suddenly it's totally different. So do you guys think that Robert has implanted part of himself into several hosts to live out as like avatars?
Or it could be something like he's speaking through them. He's using them. He could be like the Wizard of Oz, somewhere behind the curtain. All of his creations are out there running around. Because there was also the case, the young girl who, when the Man in Black captures El Lazo, and he wants him, he's talking about the game, and he's threatening El Lazo's daughter, and she snaps, breaks character, and even it's her own voice. The dialogue sounds very much like Ford. When Ford was lecturing the Man in Black in this episode, William, about the game and about how it's not for him, it was almost exactly to the dialogue that El Lazo's daughter was giving him. And it wasn't part of their original narrative or character. It seemed like they were just a vessel where he would speak through them.
I can't imagine that if he had programmed Dolores to kill him, to avoid, the retirement and having the host revolt, that he would just completely check himself out without leaving himself in some sense in every host.
Yeah, and people assume, they're saying he has to be dead because Dolores shot him through the back of the head, and we see the glass shatter in his hand. I want to remind everybody, the second time through, when Hector robs the Mariposa, and there's two of his henchmen that are going to try to rape Maeve, and I think it's Clementine. Maeve pulls out a gun and shoots the guy right through the back of the head, and his whole face explodes onto the player piano. We know he was a host, so simply because the glass shattered in Ford's hand, that's not proof that that was a human Ford or just a host, and the actual Ford is somewhere, on the edge of the parks, still playing a part.
I think it's possible, but I feel like that would cheapen the show almost. It would become just, Ford's the puppeteer behind all of it. And it just feels at that point like something that would belong on, Stars or USA or something like that. It doesn't feel like an HBO quality show, It'd be like, if you went to Carnival or something, you were like, oh, it's actually magic or something like that. It's like, it's ridiculous. Now, it's still possible. The thing that bothers me about this, though, is that what would be the purpose, right? Like, what is the motivation for Ford to do that, to stage his own death and then be in the background pulling the strings? You'd think that the first thing that Delos is going to examine is, was this a human body or was it a host body, right? And there are some distinct tells, unless he had a completely different automaton that didn't have a CPU in its head. Maybe, I guess it's possible, but it just seems, I don't know, I don't feel this one.
But we haven't seen them examine the body. It's just laying there baking in the sun. And until you open it up, we saw that when they're down and there's the drone hosts that are opening up the skull, the CPU is hidden under a fake, like a brain-like membrane. So you would see brain shoot out of his head. And it doesn't need to be that Ford is a physical body somewhere still in the park with a microphone. It could be that Ford is actually the base consciousness that is shared by all the hosts. And in that way, he's there with these personalities simply put on top as window dressing.
Thanks, Jez. Our next email comes from Thunderclap. So the man in black is searching for the maze. Lawrence's daughter gives him a clue. She tells him, follow the blood arroyo to the place where the snake lays its eggs. Then he meets Armistice down the river and assumes he's on the right trail. We are introduced to Sizemore's Odyssey of the Red River, and we assume that we should be heading there. As the river snakes through the landscape from overhead, arroyo means a steep-sided gully formed by the action of fast-flowing water in an arid or semi-arid region found chiefly in the southwestern U.S. In one of the early episodes, Logan and William meet a host that wants them to go hunting for gold. Logan insists it's a noob mission and they skip it. Maybe that was a mistake. At the top of the map in Python Pass, it fits follow the blood arroyo to the place where the snake lay its eggs. We know the maze isn't a location, but could Python Pass be an escape route, maybe an underground railroad for the hosts that have become self-aware over the past 30 years, or a place by Arnold as a backdoor?
So I like this callback, and what they're referring to is a map of, it's a topological survey of the park, and you see at the kind of at the north edge, north of Sweetwater, past these mines, there's an area called Python Pass. And again, Python being a snake was essentially the idea here is that that some parts of what we're talking about as far as a maze and different references to parts of the park are internal or more philosophical. In this case, they're talking about a physical place, right? You've got Python Pass, that would be the snake where it lays its eggs, would be the mouth of that pass. And it is possible, which raises the question of, one, how many hosts have been escorted out of the park, if that is the thing? And two, is this ultimately the door that the man in black has to find to get out, and what does that mean?
Well, that's the point I want to kind of hone in on, whether the escape route that possibly Dr. Ford, if he wanted his host to escape, he would need to know that once the park goes down into lockdown mode, that there's only one or two access points where hosts and guests can get in and out of the park. Last season, they made a big point to show us the sheer size of that terraformer that was like tearing up the earth. What if this flood was a channel that was dug to the sea that isn't just something that would use to kill the hosts, but to facilitate a way for them to escape? You're giving them access from an inland, landlocked area to the sea. And Dr. Ford would need to provide them two things. One, a means of escape, and two, give them cover that it looks like all the hosts are there dead. We're assuming it because their bodies are there. But what if that's just to say, okay, all the hosts are here dead. We're good to go. We don't need to look for them. Threats averted. But the hosts have already gone.
Okay, so both of you, I'm torn on this issue, and I wonder what you guys think about it, is would you rather the solution to all of this, everything that's going on in Westworld, be a philosophical solution, something that is from within and gives us a bigger picture of our reality and gives you something to think about, whether it's post-humanism or transhumanism? Or do you prefer that there's actually a physical solution to all this, and this is grounded in technology, and there's actually just a very, very simple explanation to it all?
I would actually prefer like a mix of both. You know, I remember Big D didn't want there to be like an actual maze, that it should symbolize something. But I do feel now at this point in the show that there should be some way for them to escape or, you know, take over. And I think that's what the door maybe symbolizes, like you said.
Everything here is code. That's what it is. I mean, I just hope they don't try to teach us some big morality lesson. You know, I hope it's a mix of both.
All right. Thanks, Thunderclap. The next email.
Thunderclap sounds like an STD.
Our next email is from Mitchell Powell. He says, Big D, short for Delos, Gene, Sweetwater Lions, and Raj Reverie Roper. Man, I'm excited to have Chat on TV Crew back in my podcast feed. It's been much too long. I'm a loyal listener of Taboo, Game of Thrones, and of course, Westworld Season 1. Love the Instacast, love Season 2, Episode 1. I have 2 points. One, I totally agree that I wish the show would have opened truly in media res with gunslinging Dolores and Delos execs running around in their formal wear, right where we left them off in season 1. They build up to such a crescendo at the end of the season, and I can't help feel as though it was somewhat underutilized. Bring us back into the scene in Westworld right away would have been a rude awakening, a splash of cold water in the face for the 18-month removed viewers to truly get us back into chaos and not just carnage mode as the episode actually does. The showing of the scene after scene of Albite dead bodies everywhere rotting away, I think did show that something truly horrid had happened, but it just cheapened it a bit for me. 2, how much do we believe that this season will have us as an audience looking at the roughly 11-day window of time between D-Day, see what I did there, and the arrival of Delos reinforcements? Will it be the bulk of the season? And if so, I can't help but think it'll be shown to us through the eyes of the very unreliable Bernard. Does that undermine the method of storytelling? Not sure. We know at some point we will see Dolores out in the real world in a time which I can only imagine was a pre-park opening on a type of road show. But how much will we be flipping back and forth between D-Day and D-Day Plus? Amount of days to fill in the gap of what the literal fuck was wrong. Thank you for everything you do. The slate of shows are all top-notch in their own right. Keep up the great work. Mitch in Pittsburgh.
Well, I noticed that Mitch listed a bunch of our podcasts you listen to. No American Gods? I mean, God, you suffered through Taboo? No American Gods?
Taboo was far better than American Gods. Come on.
Yeah, that's true. But this email got me thinking, and this led me down my first rabbit hole of the season. We can't take them at face value when they say it's 11 days, okay? We know it's been 11 days since that host was shot by Dolores because we're assuming that the playback wouldn't lie. But we don't know how long this QRF or QA has been on the beach. So it got me thinking, and I just turned into like a coroner here. And I was like, okay, how fast do bodies decompose? So I found myself at lunch at work Googling body decomposition. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to get flagged by IT. But the general time frame is they say stage 1 is the flesh stage. It's 1 to 2 days. And it's commencing with death. You start to bloat. The first evidence of breakdown of proteins and carbohydrates into a simpler compound start. The next phase is the bloat stage, 2 to 6 days. Putrefaction begins. Gases produce. An anaerobic bacteria inflation of the abdomen. Next is the decay stage. And this is 5 to 11 days. So they say at this point that the abdomen wall breakdowns allows the gases to escape. And the carcass kind of deflates like a balloon. The next one is post-decay, and this is in a dry habitat. The remains of skin, cartilage, and bone start to decompose noticeably. For them to say it's been 11 days, the guests look pretty well preserved. I know it's a dry, arid climate, but we don't see any bloating, any decay, any of the deflation or putrefaction. You as a nurse, Carrie, have you seen any dead bodies out in the sun for 11 days?
Generally not. But I will say I'm kind of confused if it was just poor writing on their part or if they're intending for us to not see them decaying because maybe they're AI.
And again, half of the stuff that we do here is speculation. We're assuming that the host bodies they look pretty meaty. You got to keep them in cold storage or they're going to decay. So I'm assuming they're biological and they react much like the human body. I always side against saying lazy or inaccurate writing.
I think with the attention to detail that Westworld has given us before, it seems unlikely. The other thing is we see a lot of weird shit going on at Escalante now. There's 2 things that we pointed out at this point. One, as you mentioned, Big D, during the deep dive, the man in black pops up under a bunch of bodies. And you're like, okay, how the hell did he get here? What went on there? Also, Bernard is brought back to it. And it seems to me, again, that this whole thing was staged for Bernard, the way the bodies are laid out. And then also when they roll over the corpse of Ford and they show the maggots crawling out of the eye socket or whatever, it seems like they're doing it as a show for Bernard. It looked like Strand had set the whole thing up to me. Again, I might just be paranoid about it. But whatever it is, something doesn't feel right about that whole scene.
Yeah, normally you have Bernard, who's a witness to the terror that happened. I would be saying, what happened? What happened? And they're very nice and polite. Does this jar your memory? Is this bringing anything back? Come on, if you think this is a manager at the park, someone who's high up on the corporate chain, you would be demanding questions. They're taking him with kid gloves, way too easy through this scene, letting him walk around. This is 100% a show set up for Bernard. What made me also, after this crazy rabbit hole I went down, I started thinking, could this be multiple loops of Bernard on the beach, where we had talked in the deep dive that the guard, Mei Ling, who has the cards that sees him as a critical high value asset, that she's more watching him as a threat than protecting him with her weapon. If you go back and watch the trailer before season 2 from the Super Bowl, there's the scene where Bernard comes upon the dead tiger. He is clearly wearing his vest, his white shirt, and looks a bit haggard. This scene, where in the premiere episode, he comes upon it again with Strand and the other members of the QA. Bernard is wearing his dress jacket, his vest, his shirt. He's cleaner. This is either an error in wardrobe and a continuity problem with filming, or it's proof that Bernard has come upon this dead tiger more than once.
I just want to know where Bernard got those glasses. Those are nice glasses. Like, I saw them and I was like, oh, they look so nice. It's got that matte black finish and like the kind of thin on the plastic face. It's nice.
No, but he leaves them. He doesn't pick them up from the beach.
I'll take them.
Hold on. Bernard needs glasses. That was one of the key components of the character. When Ford is actually teaching him, no, Bernard would pause in between thought. Then he would clean it with the cloth. For Bernard to discard his glasses like that, something bigger is going on. And I think besides the fact that they're sitting in the surf right next to him, I feel like they're hand holding him through this loop multiple times, either trying to unlock something that's in his head or find out a piece of information that they don't have.
Well, I think it's weird that not only do they not demand answers from him, but they find him, unconscious on the beach, and nobody thinks to do like a medical examination of him. Like, why wouldn't they? You've been out here for 11 days laying in the water, near the water. Who knows? We kind of want to evaluate you, right? And then therefore they would find out he was a host.
Wouldn't people be like, holy shit, he's alive. Yay. Let's check him out. No, it's get him up, get him in the routine. Let's start walking him down the beach. Let's show him what he needs to see. And another odd thing is they're purposely demonstrating the assassination of hosts on the edge of the beach. And one of the hosts that we see is Rebus, the milk drinker, Stephen Ogg from Walking Dead. He is protecting a woman. He says something to the effect of, you're going to shoot a woman over my dead body. And they shoot him. A couple hours ago, or at the banquet, he was playing William Tell with one of the board members, the female board members. He's trying to shoot the bottle off her head and kills her. Why all of a sudden now is his character completely changed and he's become a sympathetic character, other than try to evoke emotion out of Bernard, to try to trigger him with trauma?
So Mitch wrote us back. He forgot to add in here. It says, hello, host. I just wrote in, but I had another thought that I forgot to include, and I can't believe I forgot it because it's a doozy. What did you all make, if anything, of the replacement of scenes in the opening intro where the season 1 image of 2 hosts making love was replaced with a mother caressing a host baby? Is this merely an allusion to Maeve's love for her not real host daughter? Don't tell her that, though, Sizemore. Or is it a hint that hosts are able or may be able to procreate? If so, this whole analogy of mesh communication and reproduction would make the host a truly terrifying enemy combatant.
Big D, did we touch on that in the deep dive? We did, right?
We touched
whether it was literal.
Oh, well, no, I got something for you. Okay. So have you guys had a chance to check out the link I put in the notes?
Yeah, you made
No, I didn't make that.
Oh.
No, that's some crazy ass Reddit.
Oh.
That's somebody who's part of the Westworld Reddit. And what they did was they took the opening still shot of the mother and baby and then superimposed Tandy Newton's face over the top, and they slowly dissolve in and out. And it makes a pretty compelling case that character is Tandy Newton. And we saw the Tandy Newton. Well, what are you making faces about, Gene?
Just
speak your mind, Gene.
You guys keep going.
What? You don't like it?
I went to the Phoenix Museum of Science and Technology once, and there was a little booth, and you press the button. There's a caveman in there, and his face lights up, and you're in a dark booth. So then you see his face superimposed on your face. I'm not a fucking caveman.
I beg to differ.
I'll put the link in the notes and let people decide.
I fell asleep like during my second viewing of the first episode of season 2, and I had these dreams that they were taking the DNA from guests and impregnating hosts with it. So that's my tinfoil theory.
So we got some guy that superimposed a face, and Carrie had a dream. I mean, this is irrefutable evidence.
This is hard hitting Research.
If I knew how to use Word Excel, I'd make a spreadsheet of this shit.
Listen to Shad on TV, where we'll explore all the mysteries of Westworld. Be the most informed in your neighborhood.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, the next email is from Thomas Finn. He has some character theories here that we'll go over. The first one is Dolores. He writes, not a big fan of setting her up to be a badass on the kill of humans in a robot voice rampage. I hope they don't go down this road too much, as I think Dolores into too much of a bad girl type character would lead to a Westworld version of Negan from The Walking Dead. Please, please no. Teddy, as a counter to Gone Off the Reservation or Ranch in her case, Dolores, I think Teddy could potentially have one of the most interesting story arcs for season 2 in terms of his internal conflict. Love of Dolores versus needing to stop her killing spree. I can see this season ending with Teddy being in a position as being the only one that can stop Dolores, and this will provide huge emotional conflict for Teddy. Maeve, the pedestrian performance in the episode. That being said, Thandie Newton is so sexy cool in her use of the word fuck. The thing that made Maeve such a cool character in season 1 was her feistiness and her emotional growth as she was becoming sentient. Season 2 will be difficult to follow in terms of character development. Sizemore, great at being an obnoxious wanker and enjoyed the interplay with Maeve. Don't see his use in the show beyond that. I predict a mid-season bite-sized demise. Charlotte Hale, this role is totally miscast, just as in last season. She is a very one-dimensional, too unlikable, and has zero charisma. We need more than her just acting like a bitch all the time. Someone older, more experienced, and in the model of Teresa makes more sense. Hope she gets her dreamless slumber sooner rather than later. Bernarnold, the conflict within him with a lot of the focus for season 2, will he or will he not go to the host side? The injecting himself with the host version of the 5-hour energy drink thing was a bit hokey. Man in Black, to be honest, not sure what he adds now we know he is William other than a final showdown with Dolores. Another yawn. And scenery and music, after Maeve, my favorite characters living up to their season 1 performances.
So what this email did, it got me thinking the way they had laid out. And they were talking about Dolores, Teddy, Maeve, Sizemore, Charlotte, Bernard. And I started to realize that there seems to be a true dichotomy into the host personalities. Everyone is either black or white. There's very few hosts that are in that gray area. And that led me back to the Man in Black early on last season when he was tormenting Teddy. He had a line that was kind of off the cuff. He said, I never understood why they paired you guys up, meaning Teddy and Dolores. And then it hit me. It might be hard for them to create AI hosts that are a little bit gray. There are good characters who can do bad things. There are bad characters who can do good things. In this show, there's very few bad characters who do good things or good that do bad. They play one side of the role. Maybe in pairing these two opposing characters, like you put Dolores and Teddy together. Dolores is now off the rails. She's crazy. You put Teddy with her, who's trying to bring her back in and saying, the trail of blood has been, the last 10 miles. Without that opposing force, maybe the characters are less believable, or they can try to learn from their opposing viewpoint. And this might be an effort to try to have them learn from interactions and become more realistic.
I really like that, Big D. And another thing is, I think Thomas gives very short shrift to both Bernarnold and the Man in Black. First of all, Man in Black, I guarantee you, is going to be huge this season, and I think that he is really one to watch. Also, Bernarnold, the 5-hour energy drink. Okay, dude. So one of our listeners, Jeff, and I were talking about the shot that Bernarnold puts into his head. It's not 5-hour energy. So assuming that thing inside of their head is a central processing unit, that's clearly it's coolant. It's some sort of coolant and protective, and as the coolant drips out, as they lose it, then they're going to start overheating. Then you have a corruption, basically. So that stuff is actually really critical. And again, the color of it reminds me of the milk that the hosts are spawned from. There's definitely a symbolism going on there. It would be hilarious though if that stuff actually was completely unnecessary and they just convince Bernard that he needs it, like make him like a Jack Bauer type junkie.
But he seems like he's leaking like a sieve. He's going to need another shot soon. Once it starts to run low again, he's going to start overheating and freaking out. He better just hope there's dead hosts laying around.
Yeah, he's gonna be working at the Sweetwater brothel by the end of this season. Like just turning tricks for that sweet 5-hour energy.
Yes.
That's what we have for letters. It was hard to pick from the best of the best, but we did save room for some voicemails. So who do we have that called in this week?
Yeah, we had a bunch of voicemails come in. A lot of them had some interesting takes. And like the emails, just because we don't read it doesn't mean we didn't think there's value in it. Just sometimes people shared the same ideas and they got beaten out by a minute or two or an hour. But the voicemails that we're going to hear, we got 4 of them today. And the first one comes from Ken L. And here's what Ken L had to say.
Hey guys, this is Ken L. I'm calling with a quick observation for the Westworld Chat on TV podcast. I think there's an observation I made that gives some pretty serious credence to the multiple Bernards theory, and it's that Bernard is the only host we've ever seen with multiple bodies on standby in cold storage. We know that's not typical protocol because we can infer that from Maeve's plan to escape, right? Like, her plan was all about having her body burnt, so they'd have to build a new one from scratch without the explosive in the spine. If there were multiple Maeves in cold storage, this plan would never work because you'd have to keep doing it over and over and over. So we can infer it's not typical for there to be backup hosts. Now, that doesn't necessarily jive with the fact that Bernard is probably one of Ford's biggest secrets. If Delos or anyone ever found out that he had a plant in upper management who was a host, that would have been a nightmare for him. And Ford's a careful guy. He's not the kind of guy who's going to have evidence of all his misdeeds laying around. So there has to be a damn good reason why he has multiple Bernards in cold storage. Now, you can think of why he'd want to make maybe one backup in his little lab under the Ford family cottage, and that's just if something happened to Bernard, you wouldn't want your head of behavior to be missing for like a suspiciously long amount of time. But there's never a reason you can think of for why you would need 4 Bernards at once, and that's what we see. We see in that screenshot from the season 2 trailer, 3 Bernards in cold storage and Bernard walking into the room with Charlotte Hale. That's 4 at once. Can't come up with a reasonable explanation for that unless you need to have Bernard at multiple places at the same time. Ford's not sloppy. He's not going to leave that kind of evidence sitting around unless he has a damn good reason for it. So again, I think this really lends some credence to the multiple Bernards theory. I guess see it.
Okay, so what do you guys think about that? I like the fact that we hypothesized that there could be multiple Bernards running around that we don't know if it's at the same time. And Raj used to talk about Disney, how they have multiple Mickey Mouses, but not all of them are on stage at the same time. But there's another option it could be, is that they're different historical versions of Bernard. That maybe there's 3 models. And since he had an affinity for Arnold, he's just keeping those other 3 around like vintage cars in his garage.
The first scene, this first episode of season 2, when you see Dolores and Bernard together in that room, it almost feels like it's a current conversation. Her demeanor seems like the newer narrative of her being kind of a little bit crass. And it made me think that it's not Bernard and not Arnold, but maybe one of the duplicates. But also, I think the theory of there being multiple Arnolds just goes to show that Ford obviously has some plan for him and maybe, again, uses him as an avatar later on in the season.
I think in that scene, the opening scene, people have pointed out that he's wearing Arnold's outfit, right? He's not wearing the Bernard outfit in that scene when he's talking with Dolores. I think the scene tells us in itself, she's asking him about dreams. And I think it is a dream sequence. It's one of the things that we don't really talk about on the show because you expect that from other shows, but you really haven't seen that in Westworld. But this could be a Dolores dream sequence where she's trying to parse through things, trying to get answers, and it isn't. It's actually an event that never occurred.
And the other reason I think that's possibly older models of Bernard, we've seen Bernard took a bullet to the head, okay, in cold storage, and then Sylvester, or was it Felix, that came and repaired him? We're pretty confident at that point he did not have a leak, right? So now, are we led to believe that in the fight to kill the stable boy, a simple kind of glancing blow to the head with a shovel caused his cranium to crack?
All right, I want to preface this by saying I don't think this is necessarily the case, but Jeff, again, one of the listeners who was discussing the Bernard thing with me, said we're told that is their vulnerability, that a blow to the head can knock a host out of commission. We were told that in season 1. And so like Hector, he took a bunch of bullets to the body, but he didn't whack his head. Now, again, I don't think that's the case, but you remember the woodcutter as well. It's possible that just falling down, but I don't really like that idea. Also, we're talking about Sylvester here. So, I mean, he's not necessarily the best tech in the world. I mean, the guy jerks off and eats ham sandwiches.
Well, I also like the theory that maybe he's not draining from his ear from a blow to the head, but maybe overheating and is just due for maintenance. Like, how often do they actually get maintained? And if he's been out for 11, 12 days or whatever.
Or it's an older model that was more vulnerable to the head, or somebody had opened him up to access his CPU and didn't seal him up completely.
Yeah, he could have like an epidural leak.
I guess so.
So our next voicemail, Big D?
Okay, so our next voicemail came from one of our favorite, I think he was our first voicemail, was Zach Davis. And Zach doesn't have that much to say, but anytime Zach talks, he's worth a listen.
Roger, Big D, and Gene. That's right. This is Zach Davis. Y'all know what I'm calling for from Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. It is Westworld time. And just letting y'all know that I think everything's going crazy in there, but the big thing is I think that this is all something for some paramilitary groups to go in and do some training while using the host as their practice targets. There it is. You got my theory. Peace out.
Can I just say it was impossible to read the transcribed version of that voicemail?
Yeah, when we get these from Google Voice, it gives a transcription, and it is, I have to post it. Gene, Big D, Roger, Big D, and Gene. It's right. This is Zach David. She'll know what I call for Lakemart Ridge, Arkansas. It is Wes Welker. And just letting you know that I think everybody going crazy in there. But the big thing is that it's just fantastic. But to get back to what Zach says, and Zach, anytime you want to call, we will listen to your voicemail. How many times do we see that any technological advancement is usually based on some form of military purpose? You know, how many times is it laser advances? You did Real Genius. In the end, sure, it's great to have AI hosts as entertainment or what they could do in the workforce. But also the idea of having an indestructible and a force that you could just replicate with ease is always attractive to the military complex. And even though here it's not the military's using them as target practice, there's easily the potential that Delos's one of their intentions is to create a military clone host that you could just replicate, repair, put them back out in the battlefield.
Or maybe this new narrative of revolting and fighting is preparing them for war.
Wait, so you think that this could be, the purpose of this was to help the host train?
I mean, not like 100%, but I mean, like you were saying, everything that's ever been, beneficial to humankind somehow gets turned around to harm us later, right?
Okay, thank you, Zach. Again, call us whenever you want. Next one came from Nick B.
Hey, guys, this is Nick B., longtime listener, first time calling in about Westworld. Had a quick question. Wondering if you fellas think, Dr. Ford's still out there, either his consciousness or his actual being, and he's somehow hacking into the different hosts. The three times I thought I'd noticed something was that wolf running around when he looked at the man in black, and then when old little Robert was talking directly to the man in black. And then potentially the most outrageous one that might blow your skirt up is when Dolores looked at the board members and said, "Now you're in my drink." Kind of reminded me of the way Robert was talking to old William when he was a little boy. But appreciate all the effort you put in the show. Looking forward to it. Hope my accent's fancy enough to make the call. But I'll kindly take my answer off here. Appreciate it, fellas. Thanks.
I feel like Zach and Nick actually work at Westworld. Like they're actually, it's just hosts calling in. But no, Nick, I like where you're going with this. And although I don't believe that Ford is alive like a puppeteer running things, it's not too far-fetched to believe that, any guy who cares a lot about the host, cares a lot about the park, would probably, in dying, still leave some sort of a protocol, some sort of a program as sort of a guardian within the system, right? And so it could be that it is something that is an artificial intelligence programmed by Ford and with aspects of Ford that is watching over the park. I like that idea.
But we, in Westworld, in Game of Thrones, we talked about Brandon Stark and his use of green sight with the animals to see long distances. The wolf, it could be a metaphor, and we had people write in about what the wolf symbolizes in Native American cultures. It just seems to always show up when there's carnage. Anytime there's a lot of dead people, the wolf just appears. Wouldn't it be, if you want to see what's going on and be incognito, using a form of natural wildlife would make sense?
Okay, well, hold on. If I was walking down the street and I saw a bird or like a squirrel, I wouldn't go like, oh, that's probably Dr. Ford. If I see a fucking white wolf walking through town, I'd be like, that's pretty, conspicuous.
But that's the point. Nobody's seeing him because everyone's dead whenever the wolf comes out.
So then why be a wolf at all? You could just be a robot with a camera attached. Point being that wolves also just show up when there's meat around. So they might just be hungry.
Why do you got to fucking come up with the simplest answer? I like my idea better.
Well, then what was the bear there for? What about the raccoon? What about Roger's bison?
The bear could be there because it's a symbol. It's a metaphor of hibernation.
How did the tiger get there? He swam?
They can swim.
They are actually the one large cat, the big cat that does enjoy water.
So is that implying that the other parks are in swimming distance?
I don't know. Or maybe the boundaries that they say a host has never crossed, maybe it doesn't count for the water as well. Or maybe, you know what it is? That water might not have been there before. That's part of the water from the flood in the New Say.
Right. I think that the water definitely wasn't there before, but now it might be a way for them to all connect to each other now.
My God, it's like, like the natural land bridge, when like the Ice Age, when it melted and then just the world became one.
American Gods, episode 7.
Yes. So thank you very much, Nick B. And the last one we got here is from Paul M. Let's take it away, Paul.
Shadow on TV crew. No, heard you guys like accents. This is just a couple Westworld really quick theories. Roger, Big D, and Gene, what's up? It's Can Do Crayon here. A couple quick things. So to add to your guys' theory of Bernard waking up on the beach actually being part of a loop he's experiencing over and over again, in one of the Westworld Season 2 trailers, we see a shot of Bernard standing directly over that dead tiger, the Bengal tiger we see in episode 1. However, that's a different shot than we actually see in episode 1. In episode 1, we see Strand standing directly over the tiger, and Bernard's like off to the side with Stubbs and the rest of the private military company, whatever they have. And he's wearing, I don't think he has his jacket on in that shot, the trailer, him standing over the tiger. So we know that's a different occasion. So we know, at least, if it's not a loop, he revisits that tiger and he stares at it kind of with dead eyes. Keeping up with the podcast. Think they're awesome. Keep it up, guys. Peace.
So, yeah, I want to give him credit. Paul was the one who pointed me in the direction of actually going and getting the screenshots. We talked about it briefly. Do you guys think that the outfit change, is it just throwing us for a loop? Because in season 1, there were some shots of William coming into the park, getting his hat and his gun that wasn't used in the series but was in promotional materials. Do you think are they trying to throw us for a loop because they know everybody's sitting here analyzing every detail? Or do you think they're giving us a major clue?
Well, I was thinking about it over the week, and people have been referring to all sorts of outfit changes. This is Arnold's clothes, this is Bernard's clothes, whatever. As we've set up with the concept of having face blindness, I think that one of the tells that we might get is maybe faces aren't necessarily reliable, at least in Bernard's storylines, and rather that outfits, the physical body is more of a concrete thing. And there's even been, theories out there that the reason why the drone hosts look the way they do to Bernard is because they're actually more Bernards, and so he can't see himself, and therefore it looks like nothing to him. It just looks like a big white, terrifying form.
I mean, like you said earlier, you don't think that it's poor writing. So I feel like it is intentional. I don't know if it's to sway us one way or the other to trick us, but I think he's living multiple loops over that same experience.
And it's also, if you look not only at his attire, what he's wearing, but the condition of the clothes. If he's waking up in the surf multiple times, the iteration we watch where he wakes up with Strand, he's completely clothed, jacket. He looks cleaner. It looks like maybe it's the first or second time that he's gone through it. The scene from the trailer, he's pretty much shot. The clothes are worn. He's been dirty wet, dried, dirty, wet, dried a couple times. So it looks like it's not just an outfit change, but there's been a degradation. There's been a degrading of his clothing. So I think maybe the time we're seeing with Strand is one of the first, and later on we'll learn that he continues to go through it as they try to unlock whatever secret he holds in his head. But Paul, I want to give you credit for it. A lot of people on Twitter weren't sure. They think we're crazy and we're looking too much into it. But you got to go back. Nothing that we see on screen has ever led me to believe it's a mistake or an oversight. They're pretty detail-oriented.
Everything is code.
Everything.
All right, and that wraps it up for this week's Westworld Telegraph. Thanks everyone for writing in and calling in. If you didn't hear your letter on the podcast, remember all of our letters are posted online at shatontv.com, where we respond to all your emails and guests can comment and interact. That concludes this week's episode. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at ShatOnTV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. If you'd like to write in for the Telegraph or just to share your thoughts, host at shatontv.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. As we are coming back into season 2, we've been dormant for a little while. There's a lot of podcasts active right now on Westworld, and we'd love if you could help us out and give us a boost, kickstart this season again. So again, just go to iTunes, leave a review. We'd appreciate it a ton. Finally, if you like Shat on TV, check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we review the best 80s and 90s movies from our childhood that you, the audience, vote for. Check out all that information at shatthemovies.com. So on behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, Carrie Gross, and Roger Roper, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Sunday for our Westworld Instacast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the Mesa.